Welcome back to the Grid Gym Show. It is Thursday, what is it? Thursday the 15th of March. I hope you guys are having a great day. This has been a really good week. So far, we had two of our trainers out on, or two of our coaches, two of our trainers, two of our coaches. I like calling them coaches. I like distinguishing between a coach and a trainer. I think a trainer is an entry-level position, and I think a coach, whoa, kind of kicked the camera there a little bit. And a coach is another level up. And I'm realizing that I didn't mic up. Sorry, guys. I'll get that taken care of, and then you can hear me better. All right. I don't really feel like clipping it in. I think you think it'll stay there? I think it'll stay there. Anyway. So it's been kind of an interesting week. I went back to training a lot more. Got my more than I usually do. Just a few more hours, not that many. And some ideas are coming into my mind that about how we train people and what we do, and how far away everybody tends to get in the fitness industry from the fundamentals. So I want to do a video just on the fundamentals of strength and conditioning. I know it's not sexy. I know it's not something that everybody wants to talk about, but the fundamentals are the fundamentals. If you don't have those, I'm gonna have to clip this on. If you don't have those, what are we doing? We're gonna have some problems along the way if we don't have some fundamentals in place. And really, from the conceptual view of strength and conditioning and exercise, I think this is one of the things that gets caught up on why people think this is so easy. And I already know how to exercise. I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for 20 years. It's like, sure, but you've been doing the same thing for 20 years, haven't you? Or I go to a personal trainer already. He has me do crunches all day long. I'm like, oh my god. Or, whatever it is. But to me, let's go back to the fundamentals. Let's go back to the fundamentals of what actually gets us where we want to go. Because what we have here, what we have in a strength and conditioning room, what we have in a weight room, we have an environment that is extremely controllable. Meaning, we have a very closed loop environment. We understand what is to be, what is expected. We don't have to try to see into the future. When you fall and you trip and you have to catch yourself, it's a very open loop. You got to catch yourself before you fall down. So you have to do a lunge, some type of lunge to be able to catch yourself from face planting. Well, in a weight room, it's controlled. You already know I'm going to go into this lunge, and I'm going to come back up. And you practice that over and over again so that you can get really good at it. Everything that happens, everything that's in the weight room is a controlled version of what happens in real life, or it needs to be anyway. And so one of the biggest errors I see that people do in the weight room and in just an exercise in general is that they're only there to get themselves exhausted. Strength and conditioning is not about getting exhausted. It's about getting stronger. It's about working smart. You have to work smart, which implies that you have to have a certain amount of hard work attached to it. I think hard work up front, fantastic, great, a lot of applause for that. I am also very good at just working really hard, but we also have to consider that we also need to get a result. We need to get something out of this. We can't just sit here and work hard, and have no positive feedback whatsoever. No result just is no result. That's just working hard for hard work's sake. We cannot do that. We have to get some kind of result. We have to work smart. And the concepts of this thing are very, very simple. When you get down to the details of it, I think that's where it gets complicated. That's where everybody falls apart. And that's why you come to someone like me. Because we've done the details, we continuously study, we continuously keep up on this stuff. But now I'm going to scale it back. I'm going to go back straight to the conceptual fundamentals of movement. And this is going to be, it's really very simple concepts. And you'd be amazed how often I talk to other personal trainers that have no idea about this stuff. It's amazing. But anyway, we only have so many movements. I don't want to bash on other personal trainers because I think it's a great industry. It's improving. It's getting a lot better. Some people are very, very good, and they're really far behind, but at least they're making progress. They're still making people do crunches and run around the block in between sets of squats, and they're like, oh my God. It's not about getting exhausted. It's about getting stronger. I don't go to the gym to get exhausted. I go to the gym to get stronger. I don't go to the gym to get exhausted. I go to the gym to be able to be more efficient in my movements and with my energy. Now, how many movements do we really have? It seems endless. You look at exercise and it's like there's endless exercises. It's only up to the creativity of the person involved. Well, sort of. Okay, we're still starting with only so many movements. Most of us have 2 arms, 2 limbs, and a core, and then a head. Hopefully, most of us have heads. But anyway, there's only so many movements that we can do with this. Conceptual movements. We can push, we can pull, we can twist on some level, we can squat, we can lunge, we can. Some people call it a bend. I call it a hinge, where you it's more like a hinge at the hip. These are basically it. We have a single leg stance that a lot of people like to call a gait. I call it a single leg stance. A lot of people call it a single leg stance also. I think it's just more specific. And those are basically it. We have basically 7 different movements. Those are the fundamentals. Those are the fundamentals of movement. You have a push, you have a pull, you have a squat, you have a lunge, you have a single leg stance, you have a twist, and you have a hinge. Did I get all those? That's 5, right? And the important thing about this, the presentation that I really want to get across in the presentation here is that we're missing out on the how you do these movements. We all are going to do these movements. Life is going to give them to them, or we're going to give them to life. They're going to happen. Your life is going to require you to do these movements. It's going to require them to happen. Just like you can discipline yourself, or you can let life discipline you, it's going to happen. If you don't discipline you, life will do it for you. Well, this is going to same thing. Life is going to give this to you at some point or another if you don't take care of it. So don't miss out on the how. How you do the push, how you do the pull, how you do the hinge, how you do the lunge, how you do the squat. And I'm not saying that everybody should be doing these exact movements. I'm saying that we should be working towards these movements. There are people that cannot hinge. They literally have no posterior weight shift. They can't push back into their hips to be able to hinge. All they end up doing is hinging at their low back and tearing apart their spine. There are people that can't bend at the knee, can't bend at the hip to sit into a squat. Don't have the strength or the hip stability to go into a lunge and hang out there. They don't have the balance to pull off a single leg stance. They don't have the ability to push because they have pain in their shoulder. We have to find, what we're trying to do is get back to being able to do these things. Because if you can't do these 7 basic movements, these 7 fundamental movements, we're missing out on the experience of life, which I think is what all of us are here for. All of us are in this life thing to have a great experience, I would imagine. I don't know anybody that's like, you know what, I just want a really terrible, that consciously thinks, I just want a terrible life and I want it to really go awful. Unless they're being sarcastic. So don't miss out on how. We have this controllable environment. And so one of the things that I think that the fitness industry kind of wastes on is they let people move however those people want to move. Now, the error with this is that the movement that, the way that I move is the reason that I am where I am. It's the way that I move is the reason that I had the knee injury when I was in college. The way that I move is the reason that I had the hip injury when I was in college. The way that I move is the reason that I got Hey, back. Thanks for sticking in here, guys. But the way that you move is what got you here, whether that's good or bad. So the way that you move is the way that an NFL player moves, that's what got him into the NFL. The way that an elite WNBA player moves, the way that she moves is what got her there. Her movement got her there. It just depends on, and the reason that you get a back injury, your movement is what got you the back injury. It's one accumulated rep over and over and over that gets you the back injury. So good or bad, the way that we move is what gets us where we are. And the current state, our current movement will only take you to where you are now. Because that's where you are now. All right. And so when you get that, now we have to think about, okay, well, how are we going to improve upon this? This is the thing. If you're in a controllable environment, why would you just let yourself move however you want? The movement is what got you here. Good or bad, now we got to improve upon that. I don't care if you're the greatest athlete that's ever lived and you have the greatest movement patterns ever. Well, let's get really strong in those movement patterns and let's get really enhance them with other things. Okay, if you have really bad movement patterns and that's what's gotten you this back injury, well, we got to rewire everything. We got to regroove it. We got to we've got to plow the field. We got to change things up because so now we can't allow the body to move however it wants. We have to override this and make it move in a more efficient pattern and go back to the fundamentals of the exact movements that we want. And we should be working towards being able to move better. This is where the assessment comes in. The assessment is, 1, to pick where to start. We have to know where to start with every single person. Number 2, you have to know what to use with each person. And then 3, we have to know how to use those 2 things. So we have to do an assessment up front. This is where the strategy session comes in at Grit Gym. We sit there and we do a lot of joint testing. We do a comprehensive movement screen. We do a lot of stability type stuff, like how your body reacts. Like for instance, in the rotator cuff, if you can hold your arm here while I tap around on it, and it reacts really fast versus it's really slow and it just basically flops on a tiniest little. Well, we've got a stability and a reactionary issue. And there's a progression to each one of these. You can't just say, oh, well, you can't squat. Well, we're going to stick you in a squat rack and make you squat. That doesn't lead to anything good. That just gets an injury. That's doing a movement before you've earned the movement. And that's really bad. That's what we talked about with Eric last Thursday on the show. It's just if you try to do movements that you have not earned yet, or if you try to lift weights that you have not earned yet, the body will break down and it will tell you to stop and it will not allow you to do that. Think of this. Think of your body. If you trying to lift something that you can't do, like you're using a weight that you can't actually touch. When that happens, you're basically asking the body to give something that it doesn't have yet in the hope that it's going to give it to you. Well, it doesn't have it to give it to you yet. So you can't ask the body to do that. All you're doing is asking it to break down. But if you scale back a little bit and you coax it into the gain that you want, well, now the body is like, oh, okay, well, I trust you. 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 Now it gives you something. You can't ask the body for something that it doesn't have yet because it doesn't have it to give. And when you do that often enough, you get an injury. So we're trying to stay away from injuries as much as you possibly can. So for instance, with a squat, one of the biggest mistakes that I see is failure to brace the trunk. Not hollow, not pull the stomach in to the spine. But to actually, my phone's, I need to put it away. You don't want to draw in your stomach towards your spine. You want to drive out. It creates a super stiffness. It creates a situation where all of the trunk muscles create a strength that is stronger than the sum of the parts. Okay, so if you added up all the parts, they wouldn't be that strong. You add them all up together, and all of a sudden they're super strong. When we pulled it, we used to do this in the 90s, in the early 90s, late 90s, and the early 2000s, is we would draw the stomach in towards the spine because it increased TVA. TVA is transverse abdominis. It's a natural weightlifting belt on the inside of your core. When this happened, the TVA did activate and increase its volume. Let's use volume. But when the volume of the TVA increased through hollowing, all the other trunk muscles turned down their volume, so then you weren't as stable. When we braced out and pushed out and then tightened around that, all of a sudden this stomach bracing led to this super stiffness that protects the spine. So really one of the biggest mistakes with the squat is that you're not bracing, and the lower back is the force transducer. It is like an electric cord between the weight that's up here, or just your upper body in general, and what's in your legs. If you are not extremely stable in your trunk, you are not going to move any weight, you're not going to get any stronger, and your body's going to stop you because if it went any further, you'd get hurt. So that's the first thing. We got to figure out how to brace. Now, we also have to look at spine health. If our spine isn't able to take an axial load, then we can't put load on the back. We'd have to go to a different exercise. If the spine can't take shear stress, then you can't do deadlifts. There are certain things we have to look at spine health. It's extremely important. Some people don't even know that they have a back issue, and then we get into it and we find out that there are some back issues that we have to work around. Number 3, biggest mistake is sticking with the knee stays behind the toe thing. The knees should go in front of your toes in every single squat pattern except for a box squat. And box squats, I look at it. We'll go into box squats at some point, but your knee goes in front of your toe. It's a biomechanical thing. It just is. Arguing that your knee doesn't go in front of your toe is silly. It's a person just displaying that they have no clue about biomechanics. It's insane to think that your knee should not go in front of your toe. Poor selection of depth. Not everybody should be squatting ass to grass. This is a very, very bad thing. You do not want to squat all the way down to the ground. It's silly. Most people, like 40 to 60% of people walking around, like you pull 1,000 people off the street and 40 to 60% of them are going to have some kind of labral tear in their hip. One of the labrum in your shoulder, same thing as the labrum in your hip. You're going to see that in most people, and some of that could be because of deep squatting. You like just like when your baseball players tear when they hang the arm back too far, or a football player gets caught in a bad position, or you're swinging a hammer. Anyway, that layback, that going too far into external rotation is what causes that. Is where most people will tear their labrum in the shoulder. Going too far into depth on a squat tears your labrum. It's just not worth it. And if you're not doing the assessment up front, we have no idea if you have a shallow hip socket or a deep hip socket. And we don't know, you could have a femoral acetabular impingement, to get technical. Those are fun. It's just something that we have to watch out for. And then you have setup, you have the neck position, throwing your, this is one of the funniest things. I'm going to do a whole presentation on the neck position here at some point, but throwing your head back, the old thing the thing that people used to say is throw your head back like a hammer and drive. Well, when you throw your head back, for one, a hammer's head doesn't throw back. A hammer's head is securely attached to the neck of that hammer that you are swinging. Okay, it doesn't go back. It stays right here. When you throw your head back like this is a brainstem. You're compressing all that stuff back there and you're losing strength. This is a much stronger position than throwing your head back like that. Plus all the injuries that can happen, and it's just going to lead to a cranky neck tomorrow. There's other things I don't need to go into. I'm making this about a squat video. I didn't mean to do that. But some of the fundamentals of movement when we actually get into it, like what are the duties of the trunk? I like to differentiate between the trunk and the core. You cannot wiggle your eyebrows without something going on at your big toe. Okay, there's no such thing as isolation. It is not real. It is silly to think that you can isolate a muscle. You can try to like kind of feel where that muscle is going, and you can do certain things with your shoulders, sure. But everything is affecting everything. And so if we're looking at the core, for instance, if we're looking at the core, most people consider anything that manipulates the pelvis to be considered a part of the core. It's not just about the trunk. It's not just about the spine. It's about the pelvis too. You know, hip flexors are huge core muscles. The butt is a huge core muscle. And if we look at the pelvis, well, the pelvis is the lower body's version of the shoulder blade. The shoulder blade is the pelvis of the upper body. It's just separated and with less stability. But it's the same thing, essentially, conceptually. And so if anything and we consider anything like the serratus anterior that affects the shoulder blade, if it affects the shoulder blade, is it part of the core? Yes, it is. All right, well, everything, there are muscles that go from your elbow attaches that affects the shoulder blade. So everything from your elbow down, everything in your hips, and then everything all the way past your knee. So from your knee to your elbow, all part of the core. All right, and if you're going to do that, you might as well just say that it's all the core, because we can get down to the foot and how the foot is. You can make this argument, and the easiest way to do that is nothing comes in contact more with your environment than your foot. So it's a part of your core too. So I like to call the trunk. This is the trunk. What are the jobs of the trunk? The trunk is basically from the hips to the shoulders. The job of the trunk is bracing, like we talked about before. What else does it do? It anti-extends, it anti-flex, it anti-rotates, it's an anti-mover. It anti-lateral flexion, it's an anti-mover. You don't want movement at your low back. It's made to stiffen so that you can push off of things in a more efficient manner. You could not move without stiffness in your trunk. It's made to create stiffness, a super stiffness that you can propel off of. You know, what are some fundamentals of the shoulder? One of the fundamentals of the shoulder that I see a lot is a dumping. I should show this from the other side because it shows it either. A dumping of the shoulder like that. It happens when you let people bring their elbow past their body. So if you take your elbow all the way past your torso, your shoulder is going to dump. You can do this on rows. You can do this on presses. You can do this on all sorts of things. Now, for competition in powerlifting, you're going to have to take the elbow past the torso to be able to bench, right? That's in competition. In competition, you do whatever it takes to win. You have to play that sport, right? But if we're lifting to just get strong, we're lifting for life, then you don't have to do these silly things. You should make your workout fit you, not you fit your workout. It's a different deal. You should be working towards being able to press, not forcing yourself into a position that could get you hurt. With the elbow, what about hyperextension? This is something that I do. Like you can tell, I hyperextend my elbow a little bit. Now I've got to watch out for that, because if I'm pressing, I don't want to hyperextend that elbow, pushing all of that stress onto the passive limitations of my skeleton. I don't want to do that, right? You don't either. It's just going to cause a cranky shoulder, at some point lead to an elbow. Same thing with the knees. You don't want to go into hyperextension. Now, one of the interesting things about the elbow is that it's also a ball and hinge. It's a hinge, but it's also a ball and socket. See, I can turn my hand without moving my elbow. That makes that, because this bone has to roll over the top, it's a ball and socket, and it's a hinge. So there's a lot of intricate things going on here, and all of this stuff comes back and connects right on that spot. And so you beat up on the ulnar collateral ligament, to go into more technical terms, when you just constantly grip things. So that's something. There's a few nuggets there to chew on. Ankle mobility, almost everybody is dealing with some kind of dorsiflexion issue. They plantar flex pretty well, but they don't dorsiflex pretty well. So they don't point their toe back at their knee with enough mobility to be able to pull that off well. With your hips, I think almost everybody is going to do better with mobility up front, because it's just most of us have really stiff hips, but also we don't have the stability to be able to do things like lunges much of the time. So starting out and be like, well, you have to do lunges. Well, that's not totally accurate. Getting some kind of single leg work in is probably a really good idea, but it is not absolute. Some people actually would have a huge SI issue by trying to go into an extended pattern like a split squat or a lunge. Going off of my notes here, the neck, we already talked about that. Do not throw the head back when you're doing stuff. The low back, it does not want movement. This is one of the things with yoga and Pilates, is that the spine wants to be free and move around. No, it does not. It does not want to do that. Do not let the spine move around and do all that stuff. That's what gets it hurt. The low back only has, like the lumbar portion of the spine only has about 1 to 2 degrees, depending on the person, 1 to 2 degrees, and depending on the vertebrae, 1 to 2 degrees of rotation. It is not designed to move. It is huge too. It's big. It's big. The ones up here, they're really small. The ones in the middle, they're kind of in the middle. But the ones right here, these are meant to move around a lot. They have 16 to 18 degrees, or they have 16, 18, depending on the person, degrees of rotation versus 1 degree of rotation. Your low back does not like to move. You do not move at your low back or you're causing problems. There's certain guidelines that just can help a lot of people out, and that's what I wanted to go over in this video. Is just there's only so many movements. There's 7 movements. There's a push, there's a pull, there's a squat, there's a lunge, there's a single leg position, there's a hinge. What else am I? A twist. And it matters how you move just as much as how you do what you do, just as much as what you do in your workouts. What you do is extremely important. But if we're just sitting there doing it with bad movement patterns, we're asking for problems too, and that's where the assessment comes in up front, and it comes in where an expert can make a plan of progression to get you where you want to go. Because there seems to be a real divide in the fitness world. Like, oh no, everybody should squat. Not everybody should squat. Everybody should be working towards being able to squat. Maybe it's possible that you should not be squatting. It just depends. Should you have a barbell? Should everybody have a barbell on their back? No. Should everybody be doing front squats? No. Some people, that would be a max out squat. Some people just lifting their body weight is almost impossible. They need assistance to be able to do a proper squat. So they got to start somewhere, right? You can throw a barbell on their back? No, you are not. So we have to do that assessment up first, and then we have to have a progression to what's going on. But that's my little deal around fundamentals. Trunk has its duties. There's certain things around the shoulder that you have to perform. The elbow, knees, ankles. There's just little things along the way that are very fundamental that can improve a lot of different things about your strength and conditioning program. This presentation didn't go exactly how I was kind of all over the place. Sorry guys, but you want to be working towards being able to do all 7 of those movements. You might not be able to stand on one foot for more than 10 seconds, but you want to be able to get to a point where you can stand on one foot for a minute on each side. That should be like a base level thing. You want to be to a point where you can hinge, you can do a deadlift with 1.5 times your body weight. And you want to be able to squat your body weight. That's something that everybody should be able to do. When it comes to pulls and pushes, I don't really have like a solid number. I think everybody should be able to do a chin-up. Whether you're male or female, if you can't, you should be working towards that. A chin-up, maybe not a pull-up, but one chin-up, it should be like a base level expectation. Most people within the first year of training, I want them to get to at least deadlifting their body weight. I think the deadlift is more of a natural movement. We kind of just pick it up easier, and I think some of that is because millennia after millennia of picking up things off of the ground. It's just more of a natural movement than throwing something up here and squatting all the way down and coming back up. So and it loads the hips better in a little bit of a different way, and it loads the hamstrings a little bit of a different way, but there is quite a bit of shear stress going on at the low back, so it's something that we have to really take into consideration. But anyway, That's my presentation on the fundamentals. You have to get great at the fundamentals if you want to be good at movement. And it's not, you can't just do the movement however your body wants to do it. You have to do you have to override your body's willingness to go to a bad movement pattern. So it matters just as much what we do as how we do. Thanks for being here, guys. I really appreciate it. Please click the share button. This might be a better video to send out in a private message so that people understand that it's meant for them. If you know anybody that's been injured, this is definitely a video to send them. But anyway, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. We'll see you soon.